Hello, my name is Ernie Davis, and I'm going to teach you about roots about Jackie Ormes and CarlCotton. Who are we? We love museums to learn about Black history. We love sharing what we learn with others. Everyone deserves to know their history. It will build confidence in your children, parents, and inspire them to read stories about real-life heroes and sheroes. Let's help everyone have fun. Listen to a speaker. Email us when you have a question. Explore the bookshed today. Have fun. Share what you learn with others. Who was Jackie? Jackie was born in August 1st, 1911, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She was born with the name Zelda Maven Jackson. Her father was a print shop owner and her mother a homemaker. Jackie and her older sister were one of the few people of color in high school. She enjoyed after-school activities like French club and her passion, art. Jackie became editor of her high school yearbook and continued to develop her drawing skills. In the 1920s, many teenagers had to work after school or even drop out altogether. Not Jackie. She was free to focus on her schoolwork and hobbies. What did she do to achieve her goals? After graduating high school, Jackie moved to Pittsburgh to work as a proofreader and occasional reporter. After several years, Jackie moved to the front pages of the newspaper. Jackie created her first comic strip, Dixie the Hound, and highlighted Black figures like Dr. Joe Louis. In 1945, her comic strip Candy, not like my mom candy, but the edible candy meat, ran in the Chicago Defender. A cartoonist is an artist who created animated cartoons manually or on a computer. I love computer. Jackie Ormes was created and she was a cartoonist. How good she is successful. Jackie created her most famous comic strip, Patty Jo. You're a tumble 5-year-old who is strong-willed and sassy. Patty Jo discovered things like donating money and her beginning to the NAACP and March of Dimes. Patty Jo's family shows a vision for Black families with class and prosperity, a first in the comic world. The Patty Jo comics circulated in New York, Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh, and 10 other cities. Over 1 million people saw Jackie's comics. Patty Jo was turned into a baby doll for children, a positive image for Black girls. Jackie became the first Black woman in the U.S. to have a career as a cartoonist. Jackie Ormes was brave. Okay, here's an activity for kids. Be a comic book creator. In these books, I use a comic book kit and home materials. Okay, so on the top left, that was my second comic strip. And on the top right, it was during my first comic strip. When you see in the middle, you can see where all the things in the story was born and all the things began. And on the bottom left and right, you can see me gathering the tools for my comic. Now let's move on to from comics to taxidermy. Who was Carl? Born in 1918, Carl, like Gus, grew up in Chicago, Illinois. Carl began practicing taxidermy at a young age, stuffing dead squirrels, birds, and eventually house pets brought him blind neighbors who sought to memorialize their companions. Carl even practiced taxidermy at home. When he and his family lived in Gary, he used part of their garage as his personal lab. A lab is a scientist where they work like to make cures, any kind of stuff, like COVID-19. When CarlCotton moved back to Chicago, he used the bathroom for taxidermy in his apartment. A taxidermist is someone who prepares stuffs, animals, the skin of animals, and especially vertebrates. CarlCotton was a taxidermist. How did he reach his goals? When he was 22, Carl sent a letter to the family museum seeking a job as a taxidermist. He was turned down because he didn't have a doctorate or a professional reputation. In 1947, after he returned from the Naval, Carl again, this time asking to volunteer with the taxidermy staff. The family museum gave him a job as a volunteer within weeks, still was noticed, and offered a full-time position. He was very clever, Carl, well, in the letter, for years, taxidermy has been my main interest and hobby. My ambition is not doing just average taxidermy. CarlCotton was persistent. How was Carl successful? By 1966, Carl had became the first staff member of the museum's new exhibitions department, a very prestigious role. He prepared a quarter of all the birds perched in the museum's bird hall. He learned and perfected the Walter technique, well known in the taxidermy profession. His skill was so popular, he was often commissioned to create pieces for celebrities like Bearskin Red for Hugh Hefner, a very rich guy. Carl was known as one of the first European taxidermists and the first African American at the museum. Carl taught taxidermy all over the world. Okay, if you see the map, it's the Field Museum map of CarlCotton's works. So the numbers and the illustrations is the animals that CarlCotton stuffed and that you can still see today when the museum opens. Let's learn more by watching the YouTube.
This is CarlCotton. CarlCotton. It's 1953, a time when it's surprising to see an African-American man working on exhibits in a museum. I'd always been intrigued by him, and so was Rita Brooks, who works in exhibitions today. She saw this photo when searching for inspiration for Black History Month and put a call out to other staff members in the museum to find out more about him. Together, they dug deeper, reading work logs and scouring the archives. But to do Carl's legacy justice, they needed to look beyond his records and photos. So, in late 2019, we took to social media to find Carl's friends and family, who responded with remembrances, photos, and tons of fun stories. During this exchange, it became clear that he was a true Renaissance man who influenced almost every department at the Field Museum and beyond. Carl's childhood friend, noted historian Samuel Black, says Carl taught himself taxidermy at a young age, starting by artistically mounting the small animals he found dead in his Southside Chicago community and memorializing the departed pets of his neighbors and friends. At 22, Carl sent his first letter to the Field Museum, expressing interest in taxidermy and reptiles, noting that he had kept a collection of 30 venomous and non-venomous live snakes himself. They turned him down, but Carl didn't give up. After serving in Hawaii during World War II, Carl sent another letter asking for a volunteer position, which seemed to do the trick. Just over a month later, Carl had shown himself to be satisfactory in every way, and he was hired to work full-time in the now bygone division of anatomy. CarlCotton worked at the museum from 1947 until his death in 1971. Carl did fulfill his dreams of working with reptiles. His alligator snapping turtle, still on display, shows his attention to detail, artistry, and that his experience working and living with reptiles paid off. It was created using a technique called the Walters method, where an animal is posed and made into a mold, which was painted with a mixture of celluloid, an early plastic, and pigment to create something between hyper-realistic sculpture and taxidermy. While it was invented by his mentor, Leon Walters, Carl is recognized for perfecting the technique, going on to train other taxidermists in this method. Soon after Carl was hired, he was transferred to the division of birds, where he taxidermied much of the birds you can still see on display today. One of his most stunning pieces was the 16-foot-tall sculpture called Colorful Birds he created with museum staff artist E. John Pfeiffer, which included 56 birds. This display broke away from traditional zoology exhibit design. The specimens are artfully displayed on seemingly improvised curves. It could have been inspired by jazz culture, with the feeling of spontaneity in the poses and dramatic colors of the birds. It looks like
You can learn more by reading these books and reading these magazines and watching these videos. Oh, and a special thanks to the Field Museum for supplying these wonderful photos of Mr. CarlCotton. If you want to continue exploring CarlCotton, join a live video program about CarlCotton's taxidermy next month, and you can see the link. And next class on February 27th at 9:30 as always, we will do Dr. Warren Washington and Rebecca Crumpler. But for Dr. Warren Washington, we will have a guest presenter. Who is that? Who is that? Matthew Span is the guest presenter. So I will be doing Rebecca Crumpler and Matthew Span will be doing Dr. Warren Washington. Clap for Matthew. Well, that's the end, everyone. Questions and comments?
Okay, do we have any questions out there? Oh, we do have a comment in the chat that says, "Great job, Ernie," and another "Great job."
Thank you. Thank you.
We have another comment. "That was amazing, Ernie. Keep up the good work."
Thank you.
And Another great job, Ernie.
Thank you.
So interesting and so amazing.
Thank you. Again.
Yes, I will also echo all these great jobs. These two heroes there's not a lot of books and information written about them. So great job with all that research.
Thanks.
All right, let's see. Okay, here we have a question. It says, Ernie, what inspires you about the people you discussed today?
I like how CarlCotton was persistent. He never gave up. Like when the Field Museum turned him down because he didn't have those awards. But he didn't give up. You shouldn't do that too. Maybe you can get some success like CarlCotton did. He was very clever too. And what inspires me about Jackie Ormes is that she was very brave too. And I like her drawings. And I like how she described that Black girls aren't alone. That all the boys should take all the credit. Any more questions or comments?
All right, well, let's see. Yeah, so Tyler, who asked that question, said, great answer, Professor. Okay, oh, comes another question. Has the art of cartooning changed since Miss Ormes' days with today's cartoon methods?
No. What about you, Mom?
They've become more digital. So, and if we look at our definition, in Miss Ormes' days, she did more animated cartoons manually. Now, cartoonists do animated cartoons on the computer or digital, but she didn't have a computer. She used paper, pencil, and colors, and drew amazing things.
Thank you, Mom, for backing me up.
Well, if that's all our questions, I just want to, I know we're gonna make sure this gets to the Field Museum, but thank you again to the staff and archives at the Field Museum for giving us these beautiful photos of Mr. Cotton. And we'll end just once again. These maps are available at the Field Museum. You can go to the guest service desk and ask for a copy of the CarlCotton display map. And I know we sure will. Soon as all this gets over, we'll be getting our copy and walking through the Field Museum, finding all of his wonderful work. So I encourage all of you to do the same. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next month.
Any more questions or comments? Well, if there's no one, well, there is. Bye, everyone. Hope you enjoyed Roots, and thank you for the questions and comments.